Dr. Sloan, you've written a novel. Tell us about it.
I've written the first volume of a 3-volume piece. At least I hope it ends up as 3 volumes. It's a young adult fantasy, and the idea is to tell a great story, and one that will appeal to sort of young teenagers, middle teenagers, and hit right in the sweet spot of their interest. Again, I hope with a good story that also does some shaping and some teaching along the way.
So give us the title and a little bit of the synopsis.
Yeah. Well, the title is The Lost Princess and the Jewel of Periluna. So the main character is mentioned also on the cover page. The main character has the name Hamelin Stoop, and how he gets that name is part of the story. But he's a character who's left on the steps in the 1950s of an orphanage in Texas, and so he's raised in this children's home near a little town in Texas, in Southwest Texas, and so thus begins his adventure in a sense as to who he is, and it's the age-old question of identity. People talk a lot today about identity politics, but really identity is a very basic human question. Certainly the Greeks and Romans asked it, and it's a question that goes back at least as far as Homer. What's your name? Who's your family? Where are you from? Those are just basic human questions. And so that's really, at one level, that's his search to find out what's his name. Who are his people? Where is he from? And obviously to know that tells you a lot about yourself. And along the way, he meets up with some interesting friends and has a quest, an assignment. He goes into another world. This is a young adult fantasy, and he has the quest to look for a lost princess and to recover a very precious jewel. So hence the title.
So give us the history of writing.
Yeah. For me, I've always wanted to write stories. When I was a child, I made stories up. In grade school, the teachers would sometimes assign us to write a short story, and I loved making stories up. And I recall even in high school having the assignment one of our teachers gave us all the assignment to write a short story. And so my friends and I were talking about these, and I just had lots of plots. I always liked a surprise ending, kind of a catchy story. So I recall some friends even asking me, "Well, give me a story idea," so they could write the story. And so that was a lot of fun to do. Then as a person in my 20s. I read the stories of C.S. Lewis, and of course, as a lot of adults, even though they're so-called children's stories, you fall in love with the Narnia Chronicles, and I fell in love with Lewis's Space Trilogy, and then read the novels of Charles Williams, which are sort of supernatural thrillers, and of course, Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. So those are the kind of stories I loved, and I recall reading one time that C.S. Lewis said that he wanted to write the kinds of stories that he wanted to read. And so, this is the kind of story I love to read. So that's at least my own personal history for it.
How long did it take you to write volume 1?
It took a long time to write this volume. I started it over 10 years ago. I had just left Baylor and was just on a study leave and thinking about what the next steps would be for the Lord's leading in my life, and so I was doing a lot of studying, and I had this deep impulse to start writing, and it had been there for a long time. I had made a list years before that. Someone had asked me, well, what are some of the things you want to do in life? They're on sort of your bucket list of things to accomplish before you die. And writing a children's story, or writing really a young adult fiction, has just always it's been there to do. So I started this in about the year, I think it was about 2005 actually, and then at least the initial idea came, and then about a year later, 2006, I was on this study leave and started writing it. And I thought it would be easy to do because I've written things all my professional life, written articles and sermons and technical articles and popular articles. So I thought, well, this will be easy to do, but it wasn't. I didn't know a thing about writing fiction, and which is a different animal to itself. So I started reading about writing, and so it took me a long time. I had written probably 30 to 40% of it in a draft form when I suddenly realized, I don't even know what I'm doing here. And so I started going back and reading a lot about how to write and what makes good writing, fiction writing. And so I had to redo the first draft, or this first volume has been rewritten. I couldn't tell you how many times I have gone through it. It's probably been rewritten 10 times, and it's been proofread 20 times. So it's just taken me a long time. Plus, of course, I've had a lot of other exciting things to do here at HBU, and so it's really been a back burner, sort of a hobby project for me, and that's why it's taken so long.
What are the spiritual metaphors in Hamelin Stoop and the journey, or do we have to wait till we get to the novel?
No, I'll share a little bit with you. One of my ambitions in writing this relates to that. I mean, the first reason is I just wanted to write a good story. But, I think any person, what we write, what we say, comes out of your own heart and mind. And so I'm, my own personal training, educationally and academically, and is in biblical theology. So, beneath this, there are biblical metaphors and ideas. I don't think they're all that obvious, honestly, to most people. But I think, for example, in the Narnia Chronicles, you have a very obvious parallel. You've got a great lion who's the son of the emperor beyond the sea, and there's creation, but the main parallel is the lion dies in Narnia, and of course is raised from the dead. Well, I don't have anything that obvious in terms of a direct Christian parallel, but there is a lot of subterranean imagery. I've used imagery from other stories, from mythology, as well as, of course, biblical images, and the idea of a covenant, the idea of children who are lost and want to come home. That's in there, and but there is some imagery that I get out of the Book of Revelation. This book has a reference to 4 thrones. It has a great eagle in it. On the cover, the main character there on the cover is being carried by an eagle, and so that's got some biblical resonance to it of an eagle who protects the people of God.
Is there any significance to the Lone Star State being the geography?
Probably the only significance is this is where I was raised. I'm writing about places I know, and so and people I know. So, every person in here at one level, of course, is completely fictional. But of course, as with anything we write, we write about what we know. And so that was one of the first things that good writers said in the things I read. They would say, write about something you know, write about something you love. The importance of place. You have to be able to describe a scene and know a place when you write about it. Some authors, when they create a scene or create a place, they go to that place if it's a real place, or they go to places like it if it's a fictional place, and because you have to build up this sense of place. I found that to be very important. So I thought, well, simplest thing for me is to write about something out of West Texas or Southwest Texas, something that I would know a little bit about. So.
Now, although it's a young adult fiction, I'm sure people of all ages will benefit from this book.
I hope so. I actually think so, because really, when you write, even for children, you should, children would be sort of under 12 market, and then young adult is sort of the teenage market roughly. Now they even subdivided it into young, sort of mid-teens or young teens and so on. But a so-called YA or young adult fiction is usually, I take it to be sort of for 12 to 18, something like that. But the truth is, young adult fiction is widely read by adults. The Harry Potter books are young adult fiction, and of course the various the vampire books and so on, the love stories that are out there now. Those are so-called young adult fiction. So, but yeah, they're widely read by adults. The idea is, I think, it may be that you tell the story a little more simply, and some of the themes would not be themes that relate to the problems of adult issues, but the writing, the story has to be, I think, every bit as good. One of the worst things you can do is sort of try to dumb things down for people or write down to your readers. You can't do that.
And what's the strongest takeaway of the novel to you?
For me, the strongest takeaway is I think it's the underlying, you could almost say mythology. It's the underlying story that that I have tried to shape in such a way that while it's not the same thing as the biblical story, it has a lot of resonance with it, if that makes any sense. It's probably the biggest takeaway has to do with the characters and their sort of friendship, their sense of mission, how they can't accomplish what they're going to accomplish and are supposed to accomplish unless they help each other. It's a story that has a lot of themes of loyalty and sacrifice, and strength and courage, failures, and how to do something that's not just your own private mission in life, but actually is part of a larger story and a larger mission and purpose in life. So I guess those are the things that come to my mind.